What's the scariest thing that has happened to you? Viewers Edition.
Story 1. I had this really vivid dream a while ago during the summer of 2022 where I was in my grandpa's house. Not uncommon, I spent and still spend a good portion of my time there, and my mom, grandpa, and little brother were present. All of a sudden, my dad enters the house, but immediately my brother and I knew something is off. It might look like our dad, but I had the distinct feeling it wasn't. Just something that looked like him or maybe was controlling him. Either way, it starts chasing us, saying things in my dad's voice and threatening me and my brother. We run around the house trying to hide, and eventually we get separated, so now it's just me. Previously, my mom and grandpa had been talking in the kitchen and seemed not to notice the situation at all, despite my brother and I shrieking in fear and shouting at one another. I run into the back room of the house, and my brother is sitting on the couch, not noticing me at all and watching TV. I remember the distinct feeling of, oh no, it got you too, like some fake reality BS that got reset. Then, the thing that looks like my dad keeps chasing me, so I run into a side bedroom and go to a desk thinking to arm myself with something out of the cup of pencils, pens, scissors, and a letter opener. I grab a pencil, not even a particularly sharp one, just a pencil. Stupid dream logic. Anyway, I rush over to hide in that room's closet, thinking to conceal myself and plan. I know I have to try and kill this thing, even if it looks like my dad, whom I love. He's a lovely person and has never harmed my brother, mom, or anyone. I hide, and for a few minutes the thing doesn't seem to notice me. Then it opens the door to the closet I've been hiding in and goes to grab me. As it picks me up, I stab at it with my weapon. I miss the eye and instead hit it in the shoulder. It drops me, I pull my weapon away again, and run. Then I run into my bedroom and lock the door, backing away to the middle of the room as I realize I'm trapped and the thing can definitely open the door. I panic, and the last thing I do is stab myself through the eye with the pencil, presumably ending my own life. I get brief images of myself again and a voice saying, "It's happening again," before I wake up, in the same room, laying in a bed not 4 feet from where I just offed myself. I've gotten to the point where I can usually lucid dream enough during nightmares or stressful dreams that they don't really bug me anymore. I know I'm in control and can wake up if I want to, but it isn't real. It's like watching a really interactive movie or playing a video game. I was only vaguely in control the entire time. I think I was continuing the dream because I really wanted to see myself beat the monster chasing me or running away from it. I also got sucked into the story of the dream and lost my focus. I remember feeling so desperate and scared right before I looked at the pencil in my hand and made a choice. Whatever this thing was going to do to me was much worse than my self-inflicted death. Most surreal and terrifying dream I've had to boot. Talk about the your dreams are snapshots of alternate dimensions theory. Holy crap. I hope I didn't suffer too much. Maybe she just lost an eye and lived. Maybe the door held. I don't know. Love should be at the biggest quotation marks, but I love when your brain works against you like that in a nightmare. I actually had an experience where I was running through it was like a hybrid of a mall and a really futuristic hospital. I don't know. But I was being chased by a really large xenomorph from the movie Alien or Aliens, whatever. And I was running through corners, down halls, trying to throw things in its way. And I got out of its sight and I saw a room that I went in and I closed it and I locked it. It was this huge, heavy metal door, and I knew I was safe. And I was like, yes, I'm safe. And then it's like the dream rewound back to me running down the hall as if my brain knew, like, no, you can't just win. What a boring ending to this nightmare. And so I'm suddenly running down the hall again. I see the door and I'm like, I hide in there. So I got in the door, locked it, and now suddenly the ceiling has this huge vent in it that wasn't there before. And I remember looking at it and thinking, oh, that's how it gets in and gets me. And then it crashes through and I woke up like screaming. And it was horrible in the moment, but it's fun to look back on and be like, yeah, sometimes your brains realize it's a nightmare. And if you beat the nightmare, your brain's like, no, absolutely not. You're going to stick this out, you unlucky son of a gun.
Story 2. A year ago now, I went by bus through the countryside. I was leaving my then-girlfriend's house. The bus ride was always very chill. It took about 2 hours, and looking out the window in the night with music on my earphones was some of the best times. But one day, when I was taking that same bus, right as I entered, the atmosphere was just off. Normally, barely any people take that bus, so I'm used to being almost alone there. This time, the only person on the bus beside me and the driver was a middle-aged woman with a small backpack. She looked like reality was breaking around her. She saw something completely otherworldly. I sat myself somewhere far from that lady, turned my music on, and tried to get the usual vibe. But with every song played and every stop taken, I realized how in the middle of nowhere we actually are for the first time ever. With every song played and every step closer to absolute remoteness taken, the atmosphere became more eerie and unsettling. Then she started praying. She was saying how they will come and punish her for her sins. Mind that even though I was almost a whole bus apart from her, she was praying loud enough for me to hear it even with my music on. She prayed that her sins should be punished, for now she has her family's blood on her hands. At that point, I'm seriously considering either having emergency services ready on my phone or reaching for my pocket knife. Her prayers became louder and louder, and 1 second she just stops, completely, like as if she saw something in the utter darkness outside. We entered a very deep forest, in the middle of which was a bus stop in what seems to be the most remote place in the country. The bus stops to a halt. Only a dim flashing streetlight illuminates the little bench with the bus stop sign. Then, only the vague outlines of trees and pure darkness. That lady stepped off the bus with her backpack on, says absolutely nothing, and goes next to the bench. Starts to put her backpack off and throws it to the side with tremendous force, then starts sprinting into the absolute darkness, swallowing her whole. Sprinting so fast, I barely saw what happened. As the doors of the bus were closing, a loud scream resonated through the forest. The sound was absolutely not human, very primal and almost malevolent. We left the forest, and the second we did, everything felt normal again. I, in a fit of absolute confusion, asked the driver who that was and what the hell happened. He said that when she was ordering the ticket in his cab, she was in a rush and was very rude, almost to the point of aggression, but didn't show a sign of being under the influence of any substance. No wide pupils, no out-of-the-question deviations in her voice, nor her sentence structuring. Just a very rude person in a rush. Also said that he never ever met her before, nor why the hell she did what she did. He had the same vibe as me the whole time she was on board, and we talked about it the rest of the way. Side info, I live in the Czech Republic, Central Europe.
What you have described sounds like the perfect prologue to some kind of horror novel where you need to explore what's going on in these woods or something like that, because I'm captivated. I really, really do want to know more, but also that would freak me out and give me nightmares for so long if I was in your shoes.
Story 3. My creepy experience was also pretty wholesome. I lived in an apartment about 10 minutes from my high school. About 6 months after we moved in, I was trying to sleep one night and I heard someone whispering something. I couldn't make it out at first, but it started repeating about every few minutes, and I realized it was the voice of a little girl whispering, "Hello?" I looked outside to see if someone was messing with me, and I slowly traced the noise to the corner of my room where my closet was. My closet was built into the corner of my room and had mirrors on the outside. I stared at the corner for a few minutes until I could confirm the whispering was indeed coming from that corner of my room and I wasn't crazy. Well, to see what would happen, I whispered hello back. Suddenly, this positive, emotionally uplifting energy, for lack of a better term, washed over the room and the whispering stopped. I slept very well that night because of it. After that, I would have conversations with this entity, never gave her a name, nor did she ever give me one when I asked. Which I'm pretty sure she liked because the same thing would happen. A sudden burst of positive energy would wash over my room. Then, as she and I became closer, harmless physical phenomena happened, such as light poking and such. It was creepy at first, but eventually I didn't mind it all that much since she never did anything that was inconvenient/bothersome, nor did it ever escalate to anything more than that. We had these sorts of interactions every day up until I graduated and moved. She was incredibly depressed when she realized I was leaving, and it made the overall atmosphere in my room very depressing. Even my mom commented on how she felt depressed when she was in my room and how cold it was. About a month after, during a trip to pick up any mail that might have gotten sent there rather than our new address, I ran into the new tenant who moved into my unit. Single mom with a daughter who I met during a unit viewing, and she asked me if there was something wrong with my old room because her daughter refused to sleep in it because, and I kid you not, her daughter told her she doesn't want me there, she told me to get out. I told the tenant everything, and surprisingly, she believed me and asked, since I developed a sort of friendly relationship with the entity, if I could do something to calm her, the entity, down. She let me into my old unit, and I walked into my old room, which had become much nicer than when I lived there. Suddenly, an excited positive energy washed over the room that even the new tenant felt from outside the door to the room. Then, what I felt like was a small child about as tall as my waist was high hugging me. I then told her to please be welcoming to the new tenant's daughter since she was living there now and she would be her, the entity's, new friend, and that I would always cherish the conversations we had and I would remember her always. I don't know how, but I felt like she understood and poked my hand one last time. I checked back a month later, and the tenant told me nothing had happened since that day. The entity had never reached out to her daughter even when they tried to communicate with her. She let me inside again to see if I could reach out to her, but when I walked into the room, I felt nothing. Like she wasn't there anymore. I would like to think she moved on to the other side after that conversation we had. Believe me or not, I know what I experienced.
I personally don't believe in ghosts and spirits. I've always been pretty forthright about that. But I do believe that you at least think it happened, and I accept the fact that it may have happened. I don't know everything. If it did happen, yeah, that does sound kind of wholesome and interesting. And if it was just something that you experienced due to, your own beliefs or something like that, it still sounds like you gained something kind of wholesome and nice from it. And so whether or not I'm right about it not being real, that doesn't matter. I'm glad that you had that experience and shared that story.
Story 4. I thought I'd leave a story here. I know this most likely won't be seen, but I found it interesting. A little backstory. My friend, a truthful person, told a story recently about her grandpa, around 12 to 14 years old at the time. She hasn't exactly told a lie or tricked us with scary stories before, so I sort of believe this. So on to the story. So my friend's grandpa, we will call him Tim, rode his bike through thick wooded areas. These areas would sometimes have animals, so if something turned up, she wouldn't be scared. He knew the path in the forest well, and his bike was quite nice, not typically broken. One day he saw a goat that seemed to have been hurt. Not sure how, I think it was some sort of open wound in the hoof/leg. Tim puts it on his bike, he gets on, turns around, and starts going home. He is going to get this goat help. The woods are silent. He can hear the quiet humming and crunching of the bike's tires and twigs. Tim suddenly hears a sound, a thump, thump, thump on the ground. Thump, 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 almost as if someone was trying to stop the bike. He looks down to see the hooves growing larger and elongating. Tim knew that he shouldn't let the thing know that he knows. Okay, this thing isn't human. It's not animal. What is on the back of my bike? Tim looks back and front. Thump, thump, thump. Finally, the bike stops. Tim didn't stop the bike. He looks around. Every nerve in his body is ready for what is to come. A goat man, a demon, standing in his presence, and nothing. The goat was gone. No trace. That isn't all, though. No. Tim's bike was broken. Thanks for reading. If someone could tell me if this was something specific, that would be cool. Now, I even asked my friend after the story if her grandfather plays jokes or sees things. He doesn't. I don't know where this was or much more about him, only that story. If there's some page I could go to on YouTube to share this, that'd be great. I just think it's a cool and creepy story that's so close to our little town in the suburbs. Thanks. Feel free to ask questions. Story 5. Scariest thing for me was years ago when I worked for the DoD, Department of Defense, as a civilian environmental engineer. I had been posted working at this one site that had been built sometime after World War I. My office was located in the basement floor of one of the older buildings. Most of my time was spent reviewing papers. I was a water waste treatment engineer, and heading out from time to time to take samples from the water treatment facility. You'd be surprised how careful the military is with the environment, but I digress. Several times I found myself working late in the office, reviewing test results and the like, and almost every time I had the same weird thing happen. There was an old freight elevator that would, of its own accord, rattle down to where I was. You'd hear this thing just ka-thunk, and then rattle screech as it lowered to the floor I was on. The first few times I headed out to see who was riding down, or even why they were on that thing, as I'd been told it wasn't safe. Yet I couldn't ever see anyone near it. This was the kind of elevator you controlled from inside the car itself, so it wasn't like someone was pushing a button to prank me. This continued the whole time I was there, and it wasn't until shortly before I was transferred to another position that I was told that not only was I not the only person to experience that, but it was a very common problem. What's more, the reason it did that was believed to be tied to the location itself. Apparently, until the mid-'80s, the site performed destructive testing on vehicles, basically testing the survivability of various new military vehicles. To do this, they would use human cadavers that had been donated to science. After the tests, what remained of those cadavers was loaded up into cardboard biohazard barrels and brought down into the basement where I was to be incinerated. They were deemed biological waste and just burned and disposed of. I don't know how many cadavers went through that, but it stands to reason there's a lot of people who, if they knew what their body had done to it after they donated it, they wouldn't be happy.
I mean, honestly, I am happy to leave my body to science, and if you told me before I was gonna die that they were just gonna put my corpse into like a military vehicle and shoot it into a wall like a crash test dummy, I think my response would be, cool.
Story 6. A close friend of whom I had deep feelings for told me about how she had trouble trusting guys other than her brother, one of her other friends, and myself. I asked her why, and she told me that one of her guy friends tried to kiss her without consent. He apparently felt that since he'd been so nice to her for multiple years, 2 years, but apparently that's fair game to him, that he deserved something in return, that he'd held back his feelings, but when she politely declined, he tried again, and this time she wasn't polite about declining, outright telling him to leave her alone. So he grabbed her arm and begged her to give him a chance, to which she said no. Oh yeah, he did this in public, too. As she was telling me this, the only thought crossing my mind was the thought of where I could bury his body. My sister had been assaulted a few weeks prior to my friend telling me this story, so non-consensual actions toward any woman in my life is enough to send me over the edge. It's enough to make me want you dead, whether it be a kiss, touching a certain area, or outright sticking your D in her. Anything done without consent is wrong. Story 7. So my family is notorious for having paranormal encounters with ghosts and stuff. This might be the reason I've experienced so much weird stuff as a kid, or it's just that my family just attracts weird people. For most of my life, there has been a lot of weird stuff in general that can be explained and even more that can't. Such as when I was a kid, I lived in a small apartment complex in the high desert of California, and remember one day me playing in the backyard, imagine an opening behind the house that leads to the garage with a huge wall separating it from the outside world, and I was playing with the sand and drawing stuff in it. I remember looking up and seeing a man standing about 10 feet across from me wearing a black gown with a Scream mask. I was like 7 at the time and haven't even heard of Scream, let alone know what the Scream movie was or what the costume looked like. I can't make this crap up. I remember being casually walking into the house and telling my mom there was a man outside. She looked, and no one was there. The thing is, if it was an actual person, there would have been shoe marks because of the sand, and there would have been a sign of someone breaking in the backyard, but there was nothing. If it was one of our neighbors hopping over the fence, that wouldn't make sense, as the house to our right had a family of 3 with a mother, father, and 5-year-old kid, and the one to our left was empty. If someone did jump the fence to our left, that wouldn't have made sense either, as that would make the man be behind me and not in front. I don't know if this was a person dressed up as the killer from Scream, or if my mind had just happened to make me see a man in the outfit, even though I never saw the movie or had known about it.
Now, to be fair, you say that you had never seen that movie, but you were 7 years old, and you don't know what you may have seen when you were younger. If your parents had you in the room when Scream was on or something like that, and it just kind of snuck and hung around in your subconscious for a while, you saw a shadow, and an imaginative 7-year-old mind, thought they saw that thing that they once saw on TV. Like, You don't realize how much stuff really can stick with you at those impressionable young ages.
Story 8. Earlier this year, I had to get a book from my house to take to school for my English class. I'm currently a year 10, by the way, and at the time of this story, I was 14. My house has a bit of an interesting design to it. My room is at the most west side of my house, with my doorway being at the very end of my hallway. My hallway is also almost a straight line, which makes it pretty easy to see down from my room. So, one night I remembered the book I needed for school, so I got up from my bed to go grab it from my closet. The only bad thing about my closet placement is that it's placed on the opposite side of the room from my doorway, so I can see half of my hallway pretty clearly. Unless it's nighttime and there are no lights in the house apart from my room, which was the exact situation. So I open my closet door and look at some modern military and war-related books, and then a kind of unfamiliar female voice just says, "Hey, my name, you should go to bed." Scared as all F, I dash right up to the half of the hallway that's in front of my room and turn on the lights asking, "What? What?" to see if the voice will come back. While I'm doing this, I'm frantically looking down the other half of my hallway and into my sister's room to see if I could see somebody who shouldn't be there. I figured that I either made the voice up or my sister was sleep-talking again, but either way, I was scared and decided I'll just turn off the hallway light, quickly grab a book from my closet — it was about the Pol Pot regime, by the way — turn off my lamp in my room, and just sleep it off. To this day, I have not heard that voice again, and I'm effing thankful. Story 9. This is nothing huge, but still creeped me and my brother out. I was about a freshman in high school, my brother 4 years older than me. I'd only recently started to grow facial hair, so I was still relatively new to shaving. I would often forget to clean up and leave the disposable razor on the sink counter and the small hair shavings in the sink. My brother would get into my case about it. Well, one day I was in my brother's room cuddling with the cat and watching my brother play on the PS4. Then he stops to use the bathroom just across from the room. When he comes out and back into the room, he disapprovingly calls for me. Right when he called me, I remembered that I once again forgot to clean up my mess. I follow him knowing full well what he's about to lecture me on. He says, "Tell me what's wrong with this picture," as he turns around and we both enter the bathroom. He just froze. I stood confused. The razor was cleaned, cap on, in the trash can, and sink clean as well. Not only did I remember that I had left a mess, but my brother had just seen the mess mere seconds prior, and yet now it was completely taken care of. At first I thought he was trying to spook me, but he was genuinely as confused, if not more, than I was. He said it felt like he walked into a Twilight Zone episode.
Now, I admit, that's a pretty cool story. Like, what a weird little thing to happen, It's so kind of, just such a weird thing to make up that it feels like this is something you genuinely both believe happened and whatnot, which is cool. But I will say it sounds like it would make a pretty terrible Twilight Zone episode. But that show had plenty of stinkers anyway, so I'm sure they could have fit it in. I'd watch it.
Story 10. I've had a couple dreams that showed the future, but of course I had no way of knowing until I saw the same place in real life. I have a theory about why that happens. You remember the dream, but the memory is missing a piece, which was never really there because dreams are abstract and weird. Your brain naturally tries to fill in any holes in your memory. Eventually you see something that happens to fit, and voila, that memory is now complete, and you wonder how a memory from a while ago contains an image of something you've just seen for the first time. What's really happened is like when the wrong piece of a jigsaw puzzle happens to fit in a hole. That new thing you just saw happens to fit into that missing piece of memory, but it's a false positive.
If this was a TikTok channel instead of a YouTube channel, this would be the video I show where it's just playing this and you've got the bad green screen of me just going silently and adding absolutely nothing when I could have just reposted. You're on blast, TikTokers. This middle-aged loser gotcha. It's a zing. I'm the first one to make that commentary. Goodbye.
Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.